Yes, welcome to Open Forum, welcome to Free to Be, which is a very beautiful title for our session. But we know that for LGBTI people, free to be is very difficult to achieve sometimes. We have a wonderful panel, we have wonderful biographies, I would say, here, and people who will tell you their stories, and very inspiring stories. And the biographies of LGBTI people often resembles me to remind me this very famous incipit of Anna Karenina, which is a masterpiece of Tolstoy, that says that all families are, all happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This is true for many lesbian, homosexuals, many trans that experienced in their youth or later the coming out. And we talked also with Anne-Marie Cauce right before the panel about the fact that very often for LGBTI people it is a constant coming out again. And I will briefly tell you, I don't bother you with my story because they are the protagonists today, but I'm a lesbian journalist, and I had an incredible experience 4 years ago because I made a tweet, and a very stupid tweet. There was a rally, a homophobic rally in an Italian city by a group called Sentinelle. And these Sentinelle are very scary. They all stand around in a place, in a square, with a Bible in their hands, and they pray against homosexuality. It's really scary. But so my wife and I, we wanted to do a very stupid tweet, and we tweeted me and her and the dog, and we tweeted we are family as well. And the reaction was incredible. I mean, there was a lot of support, but people in Italy were reacting as if we were coming out in that moment. I was 44. I'm a come-out journalist since many years. But they realized that I'm almost, or maybe me and my wife, are the only Italian journalists who came out, really. So this is a problem, because free to be is not free to be, LGBTI, even in a liberal democracy like Italy. So I would start immediately with our panelists, because I'm not interesting, you are. So I would also come into the topic of today, which is LGBTI and health, because we know out of a lot of research that it's not healthy to be LGBTI. LGBTI people are often more often likely than straight people to commit suicide, to smoke. They drink a lot more than straight people. They are more addicted to drugs. When they get older, they risk more to be alone. So I want to talk about this with a psychologist, a scientist, like Anna-Marie Cauce. Cauce, right? Yes.
Cauce, but that's fine.
Cauce, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm easy.
She's the first Latina and first lesbian and first woman at the president at the University of Washington. And she has dedicated much work to promoting access to education and inclusiveness, but also I think you dedicated much time to studying adolescents and LGBTI. So you were born in Cuba,
Yes.
and you had to flee with your family when you were 3.
Yes, I came to the country, to the U.S. as a refugee.
Exactly.
I was on a green card until I was an adult.
Yes, and I would like you to tell us how was your coming out, which was painful.
Well, I think that, you know, I'm sure by far the oldest panelist. I'm 64. And at that point, you know, when I was growing up, there were not, you know, gay people on TV. You know, we did not have role models. LGBT people did not become university presidents or prime ministers, or, I mean, actually, I should say, there weren't openly LGBTI people. They were all over the place, I have no doubt, but they weren't open about it. And so it took me a long time to figure it out. I was actually engaged in high school, and he is now gay, and we are lovely and fabulous friends. But, you know, so by the time I kind of figured it out, I was in graduate school, and it was a supportive place to come out. So coming out to my friends was actually fairly easy. The hard part was my mother. By that point, my father had passed. And I knew it would be difficult for her. But finally, when I met the woman that I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, it was 30 years ago, I was right. I am spending the rest of my life with her. I knew that I needed my mom to know, because I needed her to be part of my family. And I wanted at some point, to be wife. At that point, I never thought that I would be able to say my wife, to know my mom. And so I did, somewhat hesitantly, told my mother. And my mother's response was probably the most painful thing that could ever happen. What she said to me was, "Now both my children are dead." Now, the context of that is that about 10 years before, my brother was murdered. He was a civil rights activist, and he was murdered by the Klan. And I was the one who had to tell my mother. And it was the most difficult thing I will probably ever do in my life, is to tell your mom that her son is dead. And so for her to make that equivalency was cruel beyond belief. Having said that, I never once doubted that my mother loved me. I mean, the sacrifices that my parents made for my brother and I to have good lives. They worked in factories so that we could go to great schools. That's why they moved to a country where there was freedom. It was very, very tough. And there was some very difficult years where we barely spoke. But eventually, and I don't know what it was, my mom said she wanted to visit. She grew to love Susan, my wife. We ended up taking my mom to Spain, which is where her family was from, on a vacation. It was lovely. My mom died in my arms, and I knew that she was proud of me, and I hope she knows that I was proud of her. It was a very happy ending. She had the wonderful, I was able to really enjoy the end of her life, and she was able to be part of mine. But it took a while to come there. And one of the messages that I really want to give is that, yes, there are some real difficulties that come with being LGBTI. The rates of suicide are higher, but there is also an incredible amount of joy, and that, you know, our lives can be full of joy. And even with that very, very difficult start with my mom, I know that I am happier and she was happier that we were authentic with each other.
Thank you. Geena Rocero.
We talked about rolling the R's. Rocero.
Rocero. Yours is a happy end as well, also after a difficult story, because you were a top model, you were internationally widely known, you were a superstar in the fashion business, but nobody knew that you were trans. Mm-hmm. And then I recommend you to watch it. It's incredibly inspiring and touching. And then you went to the TED Talks 2014. And what happened?
So, 2014, I made the decision to share my story at the TED conference. For the first time, saying my story that I'm a proud transgender woman. And it changed my life. And I like to always say that again, over and over, that I am here standing in this moment at Davos for the first time. I am a proud transgender woman, a proud transgender woman of color. I'm a proud immigrant in the United States. Because for so long, I was not owning that story, you know. But it's such a moment that I couldn't believe what would have happened after, you know, because as I've lived half of my life now in the United States, but before that half of my life, I've lived in the Philippines. And you could just imagine a very different cultural context for transgender people. In the Philippines, we have a long culture of transgender beauty pageants in the Philippines. Philippines is a very religious, Catholic, conservative tradition. But this culture of transgender beauty pageants happened during the most religious Catholic celebration. A big paradox. You can just imagine that, you know, like during, you know, let's say we're celebrating the fiesta of Our Lady of, let's say Davos, right? Let's say there's an Our Lady of Davos, right? And during those big celebrations, there would be singing contests, dance contests, but the main attraction is usually the transgender beauty pageant that happens during a religious celebration. So we have this culture of beauty pageant. And growing up in the Philippines, I never thought that I would end up becoming a beauty queen for, you know, transgender beauty pageant, but that's what happened to me. At 15 years old, I met a transgender woman named Tiger Lily. She ended up becoming my my mentor, also my trans mother. And little did I know, from 15 to 17 years old, I actually joined transgender beauty pageants all over the Philippines. I joined them all. I joined a pageant on national television. I joined a pageant next to a rice field, and then it overflows. I joined a pageant all over next to like a mountain villages in the Philippines. I joined them all. But what that thing taught me is resilience, you know, resilience to be accepted by a chosen family outside of my blood family. And yes, I am very so lucky that my mom, who accepted me for who I am. I remember when I was 5 years old in the Philippines, I would always walk around our neighborhood in this little alley, and I would always wear the t-shirt on my head or the towel, and I would always feel so feminine wearing the t-shirt or the towel on my head. And my mom asked me, how come you always wear that t-shirt in your head? I said, Mom, this is my hair. I'm a girl. At 5 years old, you know, I didn't say I was trans because the word trans did not exist at that time. I just knew from that moment on that this is who I am. But certainly moving to United States, it's a completely different realities for trans people. And it's important to put context in this situation. As I mentioned before, in the Philippines, we have this mainstream visibility of transgender people. You see trans people on TV, you see trans people, you know, in your communities, in your neighborhood. It's culturally visible to be trans in the Philippines, but not politically recognized, meaning there are no rights for trans people in the Philippines. You can't change your name and gender marker. There are no anti-discrimination. There's no access for health. So in 2001, when I made the decision to move to San Francisco first to be with my family, it was the other way around. In San Francisco, I was able to change my name and gender marker on my legal documents, but there was no transgender beauty pageant on national television. So that presented this dynamic of cultural visibility and political recognition. So that was my life. And I think after spending many years in San Francisco, I realized, you know what, I want to continue that life that I've lived in the Philippines. I moved to New York City in 2005 to be a fashion model. Again, context is important. In 2005, there was not an out transgender fashion model in New York City. So I made the decision to not share my story to my model agent that I'm trans. And for 7 years, I've lived that life. I was living stealth, as we call it in the trans community, meaning my model agent did not know I was transgender. I certainly recognized the degree of privilege that I could pass, right? I could be read as a cisgender woman. But then it presented this very difficult life that I've lived. I felt like I was constantly limiting my full potential because I couldn't really fully be myself. And I was living in this paranoia. And I think the biggest moment was I did a commercial for like a lip gloss cosmetics. And as a fashion model, that should have been the pinnacle of success, right? You're doing a cosmetic commercial, but then I would go home and I would be so paranoid that someone would out me. And it got to me where, you know, I mean, I just felt so lonely that I'm just here as a young person growing up in the Philippines wanting to live my dream, but I couldn't really fully be myself. And it got to the point that I had eczema all over my body because of the stress of, do I come out, do I not come out? And the paranoia that somebody might want to take control of my narrative, that somebody might out me on the press. So in 2014, that's when I made the decision, you know what? Done with hiding. I'm going to take control of my story. I'm going to say this in the most I would say, powerful platform of personal storytelling, which is a TED conference. I've never given a public speaking before. To do a public speaking at TED for the first time and sharing the most intimate moment in my life, it was really like, go big or go home, right? So it changed my life. And here I am. I'm here at Davos sharing this story with you all because perhaps that one decision that led me to open up to the world.
Thank you. Shamina Singh, I was in New York last year for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and we saw it here. And I was astonished by a discussion that went on in the United States, but also in Berlin, for example, the last Gay Pride, about companies supporting the LGBTI movement. I found this totally ridiculous because I come from a country where two big companies like Barilla and Dolce & Gabbana made homophobic statements. So for me, it's a great conquest, no? When companies sustain this. And I can assure you, Dolce & Gabbana are gay. So I mean, this is really something I can't understand. This is really a discussion I even in the most in my attempt to understand an anti-capitalistic attitude. But I mean, this is a big conquer, no? If companies like yours, you're the vice president of Mastercard, you were a very influential woman, you had a great career also in politics, you were appointed by Obama, no? In a commission, a very important commission, so you have dedicated also your life in the companies and in public life to inclusiveness and so on. What do you think about this?
Well, I'm really glad to be here. Is this the first session of the morning for you all? Okay, so we're going to try to keep you awake. How many of you have been waiting for this session out of all of them? Because I'm telling you, this is probably the most important, besides my wife, Ashley Bettel, who's sitting out there. Okay, so I think this panel is so important, and the panelists are so important because of what we're talking about, right? So, look, I went to high school. I went to middle school. I think we all went to elementary school. Some things were really great. Some things were not so great. And so for me, I think that becoming politically active at a very young age is partially because I don't know, I was, 10 or 11 or whatever, and I didn't have the T-shirt on my hair for hair, but I certainly like girls. And when and Ashley and I talk about this all the time, it's like one day in the 5th grade when I went for a doctor's appointment, I came back, and all the girls came running up to me, and they were like, oh, we thought you were absent today. And I was like, no, I'm here, one at a time. And I gave each girl a little hug. And that was the beginning of, my life as, I guess, as a lesbian. The thing that I think is most important, as my trans nephew told me via text this morning, was, 1, don't embarrass him, and 2, let everybody know that, well, I'm his favorite aunt, but the other thing is that, that being true, being your authentic self. I didn't win any beauty pageants, and I probably never will, but being your authentic self and trying to reach your potential is your God-given right. That's your freedom. The freedom to be you is the freedom to be whoever you want, whenever you want. However you want, doing whatever you want. For me, that was a lot related to politics and the fact that I was the daughter of immigrants living in the United States. And I think the idea of sort of saying, look, Stonewall happened, right? And that was 50 years ago. But I think that was a pivotal moment in the history of this movement that said, it's time for people to stand up. And it's okay to use your voice. And it's okay to fight for what you believe in. I think that 50 years later, we may not be fighting as hard or in the same way for the same things, because guess what? I'm married now. And that's only because people 50 years ago and 100 years ago said, we're not going to take it anymore. That we are enough. And I think that's the big lesson for me, and I hope that that's one that you all take away with, is that gay, straight, bi, whatever you are enough, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. Because those were the words that my mentor told me when I was scared and coming out to my family was, you're exactly who you're supposed to be. You love exactly who you're supposed to love. You're the right person to be here at the right time. And I think that's what politics is all, I mean, at least for me, that was politics and public service. And living that authentic life and sort of really realizing that actually it's pretty cool to be out and open and living your best life, because if you're working for a private sector company, and by the way, how many people want jobs when they graduate from high school? Do you ever want to work? Want to earn a living?
Nobody.
I think people just
Nobody, right? I didn't either. But one of the things I find out is I actually like clothes and I like nice things, and so it's nice to have a job where you can earn some money. But the thing is that when you graduate, you're going to want to maybe go to college or get a job. I'll tell you that right now, companies like mine, like Mastercard, are fighting for people like you to come and work for them. And when you're a company that values things like smart people and smart workers and talent and things like that, they'll do whatever it takes to get you. And I think that's the piece where you were talking about, is that right now, and frankly, the truth is, there's a war for talent. And if you want the smartest people and the best and the brightest people to come work for you, then you will do the things necessary, not only to make your business more successful, but to recruit and attract the best people to your business. And I think that an organization like a Mastercard or any other company, whether or not we march in a gay pride parade every day, the truth is, it's like, what happens after the parade? And
Exactly.
you're going to see on a gay pride day, you'll see every company from Walmart to Target to Mastercard to all of these organizations out there, because it gives us as an employee an opportunity to stand up as a proud member of our community and as a proud worker for our company, to say who we are and that we're proud of who we are. But I think the question to always ask is, what happens the day after the parade? And if you're working for a place that actually does pay you and believe in who you are and accept who you are and want you to be your best self, then you kind of know you're working in the right place. And if you're not, if you don't feel that, then you're not working in the right place, and you'll be able to get another job.
Thank you, Shamina. And I would like to present you now a beautiful and a wonderful artist who is Wanuri Kahiu, and she comes from Kenya. And she has made this incredible film, which is Rafiki. I saw it twice because the first time I hadn't cried long enough, and so I wanted to see it again. It's really such an inspiring film. It's a film about two adolescents, two lesbians who and their love story, which is a difficult love story because it's in Kenya. And what I found astonishing was reading your interviews, because I learned that well, there was a big story about this film. This film was censored by Kenya, by the Kenyan government. Then it went around the world. It was presented in Cannes. It won a lot of awards and so on. It's really a great film. but it was censored. And then in an interview, I think you explained that it was not censored because the love scenes, the kisses in the films, but why was it censored?
So I made Rafiki in 2018, and when I went to the classification board, but let me give you context about the classification board a little bit. The year before my film came out, the Kenya Film Classification Board banned 5 cartoons, including Adventure Time and Hey Arnold, because they thought that it was normalizing homosexuality. The year my film was to be released, earlier, the Kenya Film Classification Board then went on to, after seeing a picture of 2 male lions mounting, said that the lions needed to be separated, the lions needed to be counseled, and then said that the lions probably got that from watching gay tourists in the national park. So following that, I knew I had a problem. So when my film came out, they said to me, it's fine to have your film, just change the ending of the film and make it remorseful.
It's a happy
The ending
end.
is not remorseful enough. And if you change the ending of the film, then your film won't be banned. And when I refused to change the ending of the film, that's when it was banned. But I strongly believe, because I believe that homophobia is what is un-African. Because before colonization, remember when Kenya was colonized, when Kenya was colonized, it was colonized at the height of Puritan Victorian values. So when we were colonized, we got all the loveliness of conservativeness and Puritan values, and all the ideologies and all the traditions that existed before that, that promoted same-sex relations, ideologies and rituals were all thrown out. And then after that, we very valiantly adopted a very, how do I say it nicely? A very conservative religious practices that did not allow us to be who we could be, that did not allow us to identify how we identify. And then began to create ideologies that now continue to exist, right? So with that in mind, coming through the past of that and coming through that history, by the time my film came out, it's banned now, it continues to be banned. We knew that we were going to face some conflict. But as a result of that conflict, we sued the Kenya Film Classification Board for freedom of expression. So now we're currently in court suing the Kenyan Film Classification Board, saying that it's our right to freedom of expression as expressed in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights. And I never thought that I would be somebody who sues an office of the government. But I thought it was important because, like all of us here on this panel, we believe that love is love. And there's nothing should change that, and nobody should silence that idea. So that's where we are now.
Thank you, thank you. Xavier Bettel, you are the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. You have been even re-elected, and you're the first gay Prime Minister who was re-elected in the world, right? And
First openly.
Openly gay, yes. Not only, but there is an episode that I want you to remind us. You have always been openly gay. This is very important because you brought also your husband to all the official events and so on. I have always admired, as an economic journalist, your career because it was inspiring. And so there is an episode, a very, very funny episode, if you want, but also tragic, about the White House, when there was a photo of the spouses and the husbands of the prime ministers that were there, and what happened to your husband?
Thank you very much. My story might be a bit boring if I listen to all the passionate stories.
No, but this is funny.
Yeah, fun. So the first thing is you said that I was always open. No, I also had to do coming out, and this was not the easiest moment in my life. I was already in Parliament, and I thought I will lose the next elections. I will lose my voters. Nobody will vote for a gay candidate, and but then I was in love, and then I decided to tell it to my family and to my friends, and the first reaction was, finally you tell it to us. But we have something in common, because my father died also just before I did my coming out to my mom, and this was terrible because she told me the same evening I was with my sister, and she said to us, I will lose my son, and my sisters answered, if you continue like that, you will also lose your sister, your daughter. And so but it ended well, and she's very happy now. But it was more difficult at the beginning, but all is okay. So this story about first, I would like to thank you to be able to be here today, because I think it's the sixth time that or seventh time that I participate to Davos, to the meetings, and it's the first time that we are open, because usually when we have LGBTI topics, it's always in a small rooms, just with
outside
considered persons, very far away from the center, and without public. And so this is the first time I think that also something is on video, and that we are able to speak openly about that topic. So we also see that Davos is progressing.
We can even use the hashtag WEF20. We can.
So the story of my husband, and I'm very happy because I just read a few weeks ago an interview of the French First Lady, Brigitte Macron, and she got a question, who is your favorite First Lady? And she answered, Gauthier Destiny, my husband. So,
that's fabulous.
So the fact was, we had a NATO meeting in Brussels, and my husband said, "Oh, do I really have to go there? Blah, do you think it's?" I said, "Yes, this is nice. Try to come." And so he called, because they have this friendship also with Brigitte Macron and with Amélie Michel, who was the wife of the former Belgian Prime Minister, who is now the President of the European Council. And so he called Amélie, and Amélie said, "Oh yes, if you come, that will be great. We have a special program. I'm in charge of it." And so Gauthier called Brigitte, and Brigitte, "Are you coming?" "I don't know, because it's my first official visit. Should I come?" And so they agreed all to be there. And so he was there. He was very excited. First time he met Melania and Madame Erdogan and a lot of first ladies. And then he arrived there, and they did the family picture. And you had Brigitte Macron, Madame Erdogan, the Belgian Queen, Melania Trump, the wife of the Prime Minister of Slovenia, the wife of the President of Bulgaria, and my husband
was gone.
And he was there in the middle, you know. He was exotic on the picture. And then we were in Brussels for this meeting, and he really enjoyed it. And then in the evening, when we went back to the hotel, he said, "Oh, look, I want to show you some pictures." And the first pictures he saw in Belgian papers, he was cut.
Oh.
So you had only the ladies. So he said, "Oh." I won't have any souvenir of this. That's a pity. I won't have a souvenir picture of this meeting of the NATO. And then later there was a picture of him with all these ladies. So he said, "Look, I'm very proud." And he showed me when they visited, because they visited the chocolate factory, they visited a handbag factory, and and he was very happy about that. And then the picture was there, and then we flew to marriage to Italy, and then he was there. But that's a pity. I didn't have. And then I was not able to sleep well, and I checked, and I just got messages, "Congratulations to your husband," and on Twitter, LGBTI, great, Luxembourg, amazing. Blah, blah, blah. I said, "What is going to happen here? What happened during the night?" And I saw that the White House published a picture with my husband, but they didn't mention him. They mentioned everyone except my husband. And so people, it was big discussions in the United States, but during the night for us, because we were sleeping. And I remember Gauthier, I was there with my iPhone, my iPad, my other iPhone, my other iPad. I was in the bed checking everything, and he was there. "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh my God, you are the boss." He said, "Why?" And I showed him, and then there was a whole debate that they have done it because of he was gay, and then there was whole discussions. They put it the second day, the picture again with his name on it. So there was a whole discussions about it. But for us, it is fully normal. And now they don't call it anymore the First Lady program, but it's the spouse program.
Fantastic.
And it's for us. It's normal, you know. I'm happy to be here, but I'm the Prime Minister and I'm gay. I'm not the gay Prime Minister. And I will have in an hour a meeting with Tim Cook. I'm not meeting the gay CEO, but he's the boss of Apple. I'm the Prime Minister of my country, and we are both gay, and that's cool. That we are able to meet, to have discussions. And I think I was very surprised when I got married with my husband. It's, for example, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, wrote me a letter to tell me if I would realize how important my step was. And for us, it was fully normal. It was we just have one life. And I don't want, this sounds a bit selfish, but I don't live it for the others. So I'm doing my job. I don't want to be judged about my sexuality as long as I'm doing nothing against someone. And I don't hide it, and sometimes I have. I said that story, but I had very strange reactions. For example, I went to Africa for a meeting, and I was member of parliament, and my staff of my parliament told me, "You've wrote that you are coming there with your partner, and that you share the room." And I said, "Yes." They said, "Yes, but this is a bit complicated for this organizer. Couldn't you write that you are in the room with your assistant? And it's not your husband or partner, but your assistant." And I said, "I prefer having the reputation that I'm gay than to have sex relations with all my stuff."
Yeah, exactly.
And they accepted.
But they cut you from a photo.
Yes. So you see, and the picture, I'm always surprised about the birds, about how things are, but for me it's fully normal. And we went to visit the Queen in the UK. A few weeks ago, we are a couple, and we don't ask to be judged for that. And when I realize how many young guys do suicide because they are not able to accept themselves, or because they are scared about reaction of the other. I think that in the private sector, like Tim, who is world famous, to know that if you work in an Apple shop and you are gay, and that you know that your big boss is also gay, and that's not a problem to work for Apple and being gay, or you are working as a civil servant and you know that your prime minister is also gay. I think I don't want to be a role model, but I know that by being like I am, I can reassure some people to be like they are.
Now, this story that reminds me of the most famous story, which is Stalin cutting Maxim Gorky out of the photos, no? But I myself experienced it when the father of my wife died. He was a very, very famous person in Italy. They even cut me out of the photo in my newspaper. So I mean, what? Where am I? So no, but this is, I mean, this is a habit, and I don't know when it would end. And even I told it at the beginning in liberal democracies. But you spoke about a very important aspect. We have maybe 2 more minutes for each of you two to speak about the role model, because I think this is very important also for young people, no? You talked about Tim Cook, but we have all our role models, I think. People we watched up to since we were young and who helped us maybe in our being not transgender women or lesbian or homosexuals. I don't know, Geena.
I think you're alluding to a really interesting fact. I mean, the fact that we're having this, you know, one of the main topics here, free to be open, you know, in the main track here at Davos. I think the notion of representation is so important, right? I mean, you see us here speaking about the story. We hope next year there will be more programmings for LGBTQ people and our stories, not just because of us being LGBTQ, but other things, right? Representation is important, and making sure the voices that are not usually heard have a space at the table in the conversation and the decision-making process. I mean, there was a report that was released by Davos that in this current state, it would take us 257 to achieve gender parity. 257, that's beyond it of imagination, right? But also it's important is to break that down, right? That's usually within the context of this very binary way of looking at gender. And I think this is why the conversation about LGBTI rights and the full understanding that gender is a spectrum, gender is fluid. I think having more conversations, people speaking about their story is at the heart of this notion of why it would take 257 to achieve gender parity. Because for so long, our understanding of gender as this very rigid expectations that a man is supposed to be this way, a woman is supposed to be this way. The big conversation, can a woman be president? That shouldn't even be a question. I think those notions, why we need to have more LGBTQ people having this conversation, is to really break that down. For the longest time, we've been led to believe that gender is this very rigid understanding of gender. Yeah.
You know, this very famous, thank you. This very famous sentence of Rosa von Braunheim. She's a German artist, and she said, "I'm not homosexual, I'm not bisexual, I'm sexual." So maybe this could be a key.
Well, I think that, you know, that it's important. Representation matters. It matters very, very deeply. You know, like I say, one of the ways in which I'd like to change the conversation from all the woes that, LGBT people suffer. They're very real, and we need, but that we know what we can do to make things better. I mean, that is very clear. And one of the things that we know is that having someone, for example, for someone in middle school, for someone in high school, having someone that's open, that's representing, and that you can go to and talk to actually makes a difference for all the other students there. And so, that is the conundrum that we all face is, I don't want to be the female, lesbian, Latina president. I'm the president. But at the same time, the fact that I'm representing those things, and I think it's important that these things are intersectional. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I'm talking about role models, being Latina matters every bit as much to me as being lesbian or being a woman. But that it matters because others are watching. And when you're particularly in a position of power and you're representing, it says something to the whole community, and it makes it more comfortable for everybody else. So representation matters.
Wanuri, you founded, I forgot it before to mention it, Afrobubblegum.
Yes.
Which is a way to express art in a fierce, free, and
Frivolous.
Exactly manner. So, whom are you looking up to?
I think it's difficult. In Kenya, you can get up to 14 years in prison for being homosexual. In other parts of Africa, it can be a life sentence or even a death sentence.
Death sentence.
So it's very hard for any LGBTQ people in Kenya to find role models, to find mentors, to find people to look up to. So you find people who are either considered dissidents or people who are fighting on the outskirts. We have an amazing writer called Binyavanga Wainaina,
amongst GLBT kids, again, a lot more happiness, a lot less depression. I mean, it really is. This is not something for gay people. This is something about being human and about supporting each other as full people. And that kind of support does matter.
Thank you. I would like you to pose some questions if you want. Raise your hands, and I think the microphone will go around. Someone got a question? There, thank you. We will take 2 or 3, and then our panelists will answer you.
Hi, good morning. This is Basima from Erbil, Iraq. It's not a question, it's more of a little story I would like to share. I'm coming from, I was raised religious. I come from a conservative country. I'm straight. And I had all these, the way of I've been raised to despise a certain way and behavior and practices. And I remember I was doing my master's in Alabama in the US, which is, I think, as conservative and religious as where I come from. And I remember I saw a gay couple, and we were sitting. They were sitting in a table right next to me, outdoor, and I was kind of feeling that this is something I don't like. And I think maybe those were the only two open gay couple in the whole university or the whole city, maybe in the whole state. And they were just sitting there having food, and I was thinking to myself, like, why is this? And I'm having these thoughts, like, why they are behaving like. It was not a nice way to think, not nice and positive way of thinking towards them. And then my umbrella, which was a big one, covering me from the rain, was closed suddenly. It was kind of a reaction to my thought process. and I was trying to open it, and there were like other people sitting outside, and the only person who came like quickly and opened it for me and went back sitting is one of the gay couple. And that was like a moment of realization of humanity connection for me. And I sat there just sitting and watching them, and I remember I cried for how I was feeling, and the exact opposite of reaction that came from one of the two. And I started questioning and reflecting all the thoughts and beliefs and the ideas and ideology I came with. And I'm a totally different person today. That was like over 7 years ago. But this was a moment of me to rethink of all the beliefs and the cultural norms that we have been fed since we were kids, and these taboo topics that we're not supposed to. I remember I was a kid, I was asking religious questions about religion, why this, why these things are in here, and I was asked not to say these questions out loud because this is forbidden. And I started questioning more and more, and then my reaction to this incident is that I sat with my fellow conservative friends, and who coming mostly from the same region and background, and I started asking them, what's so wrong about same marriage legalization? Why this is a big topic? Why everybody is against it? Tell me what's scaring you? Why you're against it? Let's just think outside everything, outside the culture, the religion. And I was happy that some of them were like skeptical to talk about it because sometimes even discussing it is a taboo. But I felt happy that even within my close circle, we made the space to discuss and safe and show each other why our fears are actually not based on anything real or solid.
Thank you.
So there was like a small story I want to share.
Thank you very much for sharing this.
I want to make a comment with what she's saying. I think when it comes to religion, certainly as a person born and raised in the Philippines, a country that's been colonized multiple times over, right? A country that was colonized by Spain for 400 years, a country where you actually can't get divorced in the Philippines, the only country in the world besides the Vatican where you can't get divorced. So that's something of a context there for you. But it's also important to understand that LGBTQ people, gender fluid people, transgender people have always existed since the beginning of time. The understanding that colonization have introduced, especially maybe through the lens of religion in the Philippines in the context of Catholic conservative religion, was introduced forcefully in my culture, because for so long, transgender people, before Spain got to the Philippines, transgender people were the shamans in our community. Yes. We were the advisors to the kings and queens, right? In our language in the Philippines, we have so many dialects, but our main language, Tagalog, we actually don't have he or she on our language. We don't have he or she on our pronoun. So this kind of understanding, whether it's a context of conservative religion, especially in the, what happens in the Philippines, it applies in so many places around the world when we're talking about colonization, because this is nothing new. I mean, Merriam-Webster dictionary this year alone said that the word of the year is this thing called singular they pronoun, right? And for obviously that speaks of progress, but for some people would think, why do we have to now understand they as a singular pronoun? Yes, for most people it's new, but in most pre-colonized culture, this is nothing new. We've always understood gender as fluid, as something that you will be judged by what you do in the society, not because of your gender. So I think framing a lot of the conversations that we're having here, that this is the first time we're having a mainstream conversation about LGBTI people, like we've always existed since the beginning of time. We need to understand, and again, as a person coming from a culture that's been colonized, it's important to understand the long and rich and beautiful history that my country have had before colonization.
Also, gay lions always existed.
Exactly.
Yes.
And also, just to jump in, I think one of the things that is happening as far as arts and culture is concerned is that there's been a lot more diversity in films and TV. And this has really, really, really helped. I remember when the ban was lifted on my film for 7 days in Kenya. And for those 7 days, it was sold out. It was sold out from morning to evening, mostly because there was a ban and everybody wanted to see what was being banned. But it was sold out. And over those 7 days, we had the most number of people coming out in Kenya. Really? Because they were able to use the film, go back, take their families to see the film, and then use it to start a conversation about the truth. But also what happened as a result is that there were straight people who were in the audience who watched the film and came out and said, I have to reassess my own privilege of who I can fall in love with. And that's something as heteronormative people have to also understand, the privilege of being able to love in a straight relationship and checking it. Just like we have to check all our other privileges, white privilege, male privilege, I'm just saying. But we also have to be able to check our ideologies about who we are allowed to love, because having conversations like that, having conversations like the one you started with your friends, are important. And even though it doesn't feel like a big shift, it moves the needle forward, just in the same way that using your language moves the needle forward.
Well, and that's where, because kids are coming out earlier. Universities are generally, I'm very proud our university was rated #1 in the US for being LGBTQI friendly. But we're set up. We're set up, we have Q centers, you are allowed to use, to decide your pronouns, to decide your name. But now we need to figure out, how do we do that in high schools and in middle schools? Because people are coming to their identity earlier. And that's
exchange of discuss of ideas, opinions. But my first question is, you have called yourself a technology optimist. And we hear a lot sometimes of concerns about technologies. What makes you actually an optimist?
Well, first of all, Professor Schwab, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be back. What makes me a technology optimist? I think it's more how I got introduced to technology. Growing up, I think I had to wait for a long time. I would hear about things, but I had to literally wait before I got my hands on either a telephone or a television. And each thing, when it came into our household, I discreetly remember how it changed our lives. Television allowed me access to world news, football and cricket, which I'm passionate about. So I always had this, first-hand experience of how gaining access to technology changes people's lives. Later on, I was inspired by the One Laptop Per Child project, this goal to give $100 laptops to every child. They quite didn't get there, but I think it was a very inspiring goal and made a lot of progress in the industry. And later, we were able to make progress with Android. Each year, we bring hundreds of millions of people, and they get access to computing for the first time. We do this with low-cost, affordable Chromebooks. And seeing the difference it makes in people's lives, I think gives me great hope for the path ahead. Yeah. And more recently with AI, just in the last month alone, we have seen how AI can clearly help doctors better detect breast cancer with more accuracy. We just recently launched better rainfall prediction. Over time, AI can play a role in climate change. So when you see these examples firsthand, I'm clear-eyed about the risks with technology, but the biggest risk with AI may be failing to work on it and make more progress with it, because it can impact billions of people.
Yeah, but Sundar, you were. If I look what has happened in technology over the last, I would even say 30 years. There was one big breakthrough. It was actually when AlphaGo was beating Lee Sedol. I think we haven't really understood yet the implications of this breakthrough. And now your company, Google, is again at the forefront of another revolution, which may have even more consequences, positive or negative one. It's actually what you just announced in quantum computing. It's a breakthrough, and I have to say it's very difficult to understand. I just know it could have tremendous implications. Can you explain what we can expect from quantum computing? And you are now the leader. You have made the big breakthrough.
No, it's an extraordinarily important milestone. Last year we achieved something what's known in the field as quantum supremacy. It is when you can take quantum computers and they can do something which classical computers cannot. I like the way you characterized it. It's as inspiring a milestone as the Deep Blue moment or AlphaGo playing with Lee Sedol. To me, nature at a fundamental level works in a quantum way. At a subatomic level, things can exist in many different states at the same time. Classical computers work in ones and zeros. So we know that's an imperfect way to simulate nature. Nature works differently. So what's exciting about quantum computing and why we are so excited about the possibilities is it'll allow us to understand the world in a deeper way. We can simulate nature better. So that means simulating molecular structures. So maybe we can discover better drugs. Understanding climate in a deeper way so that we can predict weather patterns and tackle climate change. We can design better batteries. Nitrogen fixation, which is the process by which we make the world's fertilizers, accounts for 2% of carbon emissions. And the process hasn't changed in a long time because it's very complicated. Quantum computers one day allows us the hope that we can make that process more efficient. So it's very profound. We've all been dealing in technology with the end of Moore's law. It's really revolutionized the past 40 years, but it's leveled off. So when I look at the future and say, how do we drive improvements, quantum would be one of the tools in our arsenal by which we can keep something like Moore's law continuing to evolve. So the potential is huge, and we'll have challenges. In a 5 to 10 year time frame, quantum computing will break encryption as we know it today. But we can work around it. We need to do quantum encryption. So there are challenges, as always, with any evolving technology. But I think the combination of AI and quantum will help us tackle some of the biggest problems we see.
And you add also, to a certain extent, genetics. I mean, I think quantum computing and biology will
one of the biggest potential.
Will have a great potential, positive and negative one.
The positive one, as you're saying rightly, is to to simulate molecules, protein folding, etc. It's very, very complex today. We cannot do it with classical computers. So with quantum computers, we can. Yeah. But we have to be clear-eyed about, all these powerful technologies. And, this is why, I think we need to be deliberate and regulate technologies like AI. And as a society, need to engage on it.
But that leads me to the next question, actually, because in an editorial in Financial Times, which I read just before the annual meeting, you stated, and I quote, Google's role starts with recognizing the need for a principled and regulated approach for applying artificial intelligence. What does it really mean?
I've said this before, AI is one of the most profound things we are working on as humanity. It's more profound than fire or electricity or any of the other bigger things we have worked on. It has tremendous positive sides to it, but, it has real negative consequences. When you think about technologies like facial recognition, it can be used to benefit. It can be used to find missing people, but it can be used for mass surveillance. And as democratic countries with a shared set of values, we need to, build on those values and make sure when we approach AI, we are doing it in a way that serves society. And that means making sure AI doesn't have bias, that we build and test it for safety. We make sure that there is human agency, that it's ultimately accountable to people. About 18 months ago, we published a set of principles under which we would develop AI as Google. Mm-hmm. But it's been very encouraging to see the European Commission has identified AI and sustainability as their, top priorities. Mm-hmm. And U.S. put out a set of principles last week, and be it the OECD or G20, they're talking about this, which I think is very, very encouraging. And I think we need a common framework by which we approach AI.
Are you satisfied with those frameworks you said, which have been developed until now? I mean, you referred to the OECD framework, G20 framework.
It's an early start. Yeah. But I'm very encouraged that they have a lot of commonality, and that's because they are rooted in common human values. So I think it's a great start, but we need to get more specific and evolve it significantly. I think the European Commission is working on a white paper around AI, and I think that's an important first step, and we all need to engage. As a company, we are committed to engaging in the process, but it's going to need everyone from around the world. AI is no different from climate. You can't get safety by just having one country or a set of countries working on it. You need a global framework to arrive at a safer world there.
But Sundar, you emphasize a global framework now. The question is, how much is actually China engaged into those efforts? And don't you see the danger of the two circles, and that at the end we end up with two different frameworks, one which is more coming out of Beijing, and one which is developed inside the OECD concept?
I think there is concern that we could, bifurcate here, but I think it's important not to do so. I'm optimistic because, just like in climate, I think there's more alignment. We have things like the Paris Agreement. The world comes together because everyone shares the climate in which the Earth, how it affects the Earth, and so I think that's true for AI. So down the line, I think there'll be a common gravitational pull, regardless of who you are, to try and converge. Otherwise, you won't be able to achieve peace and prosperity. So I think there'll be a gravitational pull.
No, we need it, and actually, the forum with its Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution is trying to bring the parties together. Now, I changed for a moment the subject, and when you look at the GDPR, the California Data Privacy Act, regulators start to take meaningful action to protect consumer privacy and address, it's a second issue, the growing antitrust concerns, Google buying up all startups which are in the, let's say, AI area and so on. And some believe that actually companies like Google should pay, I think it was called, a digital dividend. Can you share with us what is actually the policy of Google? And I have here two. I come back: privacy and antitrust.
You know, it's a great question. First of all, maybe we'll talk about privacy. You know, GDPR has been a great template. I think it gives a standardized privacy framework. You know, and often when we are in other countries and when they are thinking about privacy regulation, you know, we point to GDPR as a template. I'm glad Europe took the lead on it. And I think that gives a good framework for all of us to work on. For us, you know, privacy is at the heart of what we do. You know, users come to Google at very important moments, ask us questions. We deal with people's sensitive information in Gmail, Google Photos, and so on. And so we have to earn that trust. And you know, today we do it by giving them control and transparency and choice around it. And over time, I think AI actually allows us to do this better. We can do more for our users. Most of the data today we deal with is to help users with their information needs. And we can do that with less data over time. And it's counterintuitive. But last year, for example, if you use Google's keyboard, we actually now learn what to suggest, but we don't send the raw data back. We only compute our models, and the data stays on the phones. So over time, I think we can do more things on device. We can use AI to actually preserve privacy as we improve user experiences. And I do think it's important that products need to work for everyone. It's a foundational principle. So today, if you take a product like YouTube, we allow users to pay for it and get it in an ad-free basis, or you have an ad-supported product. It's what allows us to take information and provide many services to billions of people around the world. And you know, privacy cannot be a luxury good. We need to make sure we develop services in a way that works for everyone, but puts them first and you know, is privacy enhancing. And that's the journey we are all on. But ultimately, it's up to users to choose. On your second question, I think with our scale, rightfully comes scrutiny. You're right, we have bought startups, but you know, as a company, we invest every single year in hundreds of startups through our venture arms. We support entrepreneurs and incubators around the world. You know, through our Grow with Google program, we are trying to digitally skill millions of people. In Europe alone, we have skilled over 5 million Europeans. So with scale comes the chance to work on things, take a long-term view on important technologies like AI and quantum computing. And so, you know, it gives us a chance to do that. But ultimately, you know, we have to do it all in a way that works for society. That's the real test. And society has to judge whether what we are doing is beneficial. And, you know, we want to engage constructively in the process and you know, and earn our right to do that. But we aren't building up scale for scale's sake. You know, we are trying to do important things for our users.
I'm sure. Let's integrate the audience for a moment. And we don't, even if you don't have a microphone, just speak loud. I'm sure there might be a follow-up, if you don't mind.
Please, yeah.
Let's see anybody who, and we stick to the question of privacy or antitrust, please, at the moment. Do you want?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, Sundar. My name is Samar Sekka. I'm from the Global Shapers community from India. First of all, I'm a huge admirer and a tech enthusiast myself. I wanted to ask you, India is in right now, it's a huge market for you. Your program on the next billion users is aimed at India. India is right now in the middle of a data protection bill, which has seen a lot of changes over the last year. It was first seen as very restrictive to global multinationals like Google and other big tech companies. Now that it is being debated, India, the government has eased some of those regulations. At either of these points, Google has not actively lobbied or fought this bill. They have said that we'll comply with what the government says. What is your view on it? Because you're one of the few CEOs, unlike I think many of your counterparts, who takes a balanced view, saying that there are risks, but there are also benefits. People generally come out, CEOs generally come out on either end of that spectrum. What would you like to see come out of the data protection bill, where the next billion users in India could benefit, but Google could also sort of move towards its vision?
I would just enlarge your question and not related to India, but to what. So the question would be, if you would design, from your point of view, an ideal data protection bill, how would it look like?
It's a great question. We are in the World Economic Forum. We bring people together. That's what the internet is all about. The value of internet comes in connecting the world. And to do that, you need a free, open internet to work. At the same time, and I see it's not just in India, as Professor Schwab mentioned, it's a big topic in Europe and all other countries around the world. Politicians, rightfully, they are charged with protecting their citizens, and as part of that, data sovereignty is an important topic as well. But it is inherently a balance, right? And I think countries need to focus on the highest risk areas and maybe add protections around it. But you want to, help preserve a common internet. Even in India, for example, if you take a product like YouTube, many creators in India, more than 50% of their views come from outside of India. The internet is essentially an export product. You can build a service, regardless of where you build it, you can reach people around the world. That's what's great about the digital economy. It creates new opportunities. And so that's the balance countries have to strike. But I think, I think there are good regulations. GDPR is a good framework as we think about how you can protect privacy for your users, for your citizens. Doesn't always mean data has to be siloed in a particular way. And I think we need to evolve those frameworks carefully.
Any other comments? Let me see.
Maybe someone from behind.
Let's go into back.
Yeah.
Hello,
my name is Guan from Learnable AI, actually an AI startup from Harvard Innovation Lab. So we do a lot of explainable AI. And I'm a big fan of Google's technology, especially DeepMind. So I want to know, in terms of transparency and explainability for AI, what do Google think and what's Google's plan? Thank you.
Such a great question. One of our AI principles is that AI is ultimately accountable to humans, and to do that, well, explainability is a big part of it. Now, you can imagine a self-driving car making a decision and us being able to explain. I think it's worth remembering humans can't always explain how we make our decisions. We think we can, and we say some things, but that's not how it really happens. So I think it's worth remembering that. But we are building, it's one of our most active areas of research. For example, to counter AI bias, last year we published research. So for example, if you have an image recognition algorithm and it predicts and says these are doctors, we can now say what are the variables you're using to predict that these images are doctors. It may say white coats, that makes sense. But sometimes the model can say male because it has seen only pictures of male doctors. And then it's not working well. That's an example of explainability which we do. And we are working hard to drive that. But it is an area of research. But I think it's an important principle to do that before we use AI in high-risk applications. And but it's exciting as well. AI actually gives us a chance to do some things where humans are actually biased, and we reinforce our bias to understand that, counter it, and do it in a better way as well. So we need to invest to get there.
Yeah. Let me take one other.
Hello, I'm Claudio Leverance, also from the Global Shapers community. And I wanted to know your thoughts about data privacy and health-related data. What do you think is the direction that Google will lead the health data in?
The good thing about the healthcare sector, is that there are already strong regulations in place. As we think about regulating AI, I think it's important to leverage regulations where they exist. And healthcare has good privacy protecting regulations in place. As Google, we see a huge opportunity in healthcare. But when we work on healthcare, when we work with hospitals, the data belongs to hospitals, right? And that's how we approach it. Where we can, we encrypt the data, and the hospitals would have the key for it. But look at the potential here. When we look at an area like radiology, people, there are often times cancer gets missed, and the difference in outcomes is profound. When you take an area like lung cancer and you show the pathology results to experts, very often if you show it to 10 experts, 5 people agree one way, 5 people agree the other way. We know we can use AI to make it better. And so I think it's important we do that. But I think these are areas in which you have to do it with privacy in mind. I'm encouraged that there is strong privacy protecting regulation already in place, which gives us a framework to do it well. But I think healthcare offers the biggest potential, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years to really improve outcomes. And so we are committed to doing that.
The forum is working together with the Japanese government to address this issue, to find the right balance between privacy and access to the data. Now, if I look at Apple and particularly also your transition from at Google and your transition from now from Google to Alphabet, you are involved in so many different areas. I mean, Waymo, Sidewalk, and so on and so on. How do you see the future of the company? Is it a giant which sucks up everything, or how do you see Google in 5 years from now?
Look, we know we will do well only if others do well along with us. That's how Google works. Today, through search, we help users reach information they want, including businesses, and businesses grow along with search. In the US alone last year, we created $335 billion of economic opportunity, and that's true in every country around the world. We think with Alphabet there's a real chance to take a long-term view and work on technology which can improve people's lives. But we won't do it alone. In many of the other bets which we are working on, where we can, we take outside investments. Yeah. These companies are independent, so you can imagine we'll do it in partnerships with other companies. And Alphabet gives us the flexibility to have different structures for different areas in the way we need them to. If it's healthcare, we can deeply partner with other companies. Today we partner with the leading healthcare companies as we work on these efforts. So we understand for Alphabet to do well, we inherently need to do it in a way that works with other companies, creates an ecosystem around it. This is why last year, just through our venture arm, we invested in over 100 companies. We are just investors in these companies, and they're going to be independent companies. We want them to thrive and succeed. And so, that's the way we think about it. But I think it gives us a real chance to take a long-term view, be it self-driving cars or AI, and approach it with a long-term view in mind.
So now, one last question. You are now at the top of one of the 3 or 4, whatever you say, not only most valuable companies, but most powerful companies. You said you are an optimist. When you wake up at night, and you cannot sleep anymore, what worries you at that time?
You were pretty insightful. When you wake up at night, that is literally true. Yeah, I do wake up at night. What worries me at night, I think technology has a chance to transform, society for the good, but we need to learn to harness it to work for society's good. But I do worry that we turn our backs on technology, and I worry that, when people do that, they get left behind too. And so to me, how do you do it in an inclusive way? Just coming here, I was in Belgium and I went to Molenbeek. It's a startup incubator in Molenbeek. In that community, you see people who may not have gone to school, but when you give them access to digital skills, they're so hungry for it.
Yeah.
People want to learn technology and be a part of it.
Yeah.
That's the desire you see around the world when we travel, when I go to emerging markets. You know, it's a big source of opportunity. And so I think it's our duty and responsibility to drive this growth in an inclusive way. And so that keeps me up at night.
If you translate it in the political field, I think the transition we have had is, in the first industrial revolution, we created new ideologies like Marxism, socialism, and capitalism. Today, I think the dividing line in the society is between those who embrace technology and those who reject technology. So you have also an important role as a prophet or missionary to explain that all those new technologies at the end are beneficial for humankind.
You know, very much so. Search at the heart works. It does not matter whether you're a student in Africa or you're a professor at Stanford. You know, search works the same way as long as you have access to a computer and connectivity. You know, that's an equalizing force, and you know, then that's how we need to approach technology over time. And I think that's the real opportunity we have.
So you don't have to, if I take your role, you don't have to sell only a product or manage your, I don't know how many people now, but you have to be at the outfront to explain continuously that what you are doing is good. Now, how much time do you devote to the third portion of your responsibility?
You know, I think with with scale comes that responsibility. I do see as a big role for us to engage externally, you know, partner with other institutions, be it governments, regulators, nonprofits, educational institutions.
The forum.
The World Economic Forum, and engage. And I think it's a big part of what we do.
No, thank you very much to have responded to those sometimes critical questions, and we hope that we can continue this discussion in the coming years, and we wish you all the best in the meantime, and we all will use Google substantially in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.